Be strong.
Hello and welcome to Eternal Durdles. I'm your host, Zach Clark, and with me as always, Phil Bleckman. Phil, how's it going, man?
Oh, wow. I just got an idea. That was a light bulb joke for all of the auditory listeners that aren't watching us on the YouTubes. You could be, and you could see all of these visually related jokes that are just top quality legacy opening content, peeps.
Yeah, the visual jokes on Eternal Durdles are really next level.
I didn't realize that I was going to get so aggro right from the get-go of the episode. I don't really have anything to be aggressive about. I just realized I started with an aggressive joke.
Speaking of aggressive, though, we should talk about the July 10th legacy meta for the Arizona Magic Series City Champs.
I just want to let you know your segue game is unparalleled.
Yes. I want to thank Matt Hackbert for hooking us up with this info. Matt, friend of the cast, Patreon supporter, and all-around excellent dude.
Hackbert also is the focal point of one of my favorite Magic the Gathering legacy paper stories of all time. I get that sounds specific, but it's pretty broad, right?
You should tell the story.
So there was one time, it was GP Atlanta, I think, was the one that, what was the one that was GP Ren 6, like right before Ren 6 got banned?
Let's go with Atlanta. Why not?
It was the one, it was, yeah. Why am I forgetting what the top 8 was? Well, the top 8 was Storm 1. There was a bunch of Blue-Red Delver with Ren 6. And then there was a mirror match of Turbo Depths in the top 8. I don't remember if it was top 8 or semifinals, but it was in the top 8. There was a mirror match going on. And there was a judge call about a pithing needle or something. I don't exactly remember what the call was about, but it was at the time when there wasn't any GP coverage anymore, right? So you had a bunch of people watching the top 8 and essentially were like live tweeting it. Like Anzidi was live tweeting it. He was there on the sidelines. And Hackbert was just recording it on his phone, I guess. Or he was like streaming it to other people. He was doing something with it where he was just recording the match. Anyway, there's a judge call, and the judge doesn't know what call to make. And so he pulls me and Sam Rukas aside, who were watching right next to that match. He pulls us aside and he's like, did you see what happened? Did you see what went down? And we both knew that there was like clearly XYZ happened. So-and-so is the call and such, but that would be just taking our word for it, right? And we are not part of the tournament anymore. And the judge doesn't know who we are, right? We're just people that are on the sidelines.
Just some guys.
So we're saying, yeah, this is obviously the call, but we also were like, but we don't know if you should just take our word for it because that seems weird for a judge to do because
agreed,
obvious reasons, right? Like, okay. Anyway, so we're hashing that out with the judge, and the judge doesn't know what call to make because they're like, do I trust these guys or do I have to like come up with my own thing? Like, what do I do? And Hackbert like casually walks over and he's like, I got it all on camera. And then Sam and I were like, go with that. Do that, judge.
Do the camera.
So Hackbert just rolls back the tape. It was exactly what we told the judge it was, but now he has like actual evidence that that was the case. So Hackbert just in the right place at the right time, saves the day, makes the right call in the top 8. It ultimately doesn't matter. Neither of those decks ended up winning the event, but still a big moment in the top 8 for Hackbert. Patreon supporter Hackbert saves the day. Well done. Applaud you to this day.
Golf clap it. Okay, so let's talk about this tournament and the top. We'll go over the top 16, but let's talk about maybe we should talk about the bottom 8 first, and then lead that up to the number 1 deck. What do you think? How do you want to mix this up?
So let's just point out that in this extremely small sample size, it's a fairly diverse looking metagame, right?
Yes.
Here's what we got. We got some Black-Red Reanimator. We got Madness, 8 Root Wall of Madness. We have the Jeskai Saga Skill deck that's been doing really well recently online. A bunch of Blue-Red Delver, a bunch of Death and Taxes. A Merfolk deck actually made it with 4 main deck Chalice, as per usual. Turbo Deaths made the top 16. Cephalid Breakfast made the top 16. There was a Goblins deck represented, and a Bug Control deck that is really just a Bug Green Sun Zenith mid-range deck with like Tarmogoyfs and your Leovolds and whatnot, like classic old school mid-rangey green deck. But it's a Green Sun Zenith deck is the pillar that it's using, and it's using new cards like Grist as targets. So
we should mention that Hackber is in the top 16.
Yes, yeah. Let's see, what deck was he on in this
Cephalid Breakfast.
He was on his classic Cephalid Breakfast, which got one of the upgrades, right? Like that was one of the big upgrades was Cauldron Complete coming out of MH2. Yep. That's one of the cards that has been showing up both obviously now in Cephalid Breakfast, but also I believe Death and Taxes has been moving it over to the main in a lot of cases. Yeah, there's one of the top 8 D&T decks has one in the main here. Oh, they both have them in the main. Looking at it.
It's a good card.
That card's been a slam dunk. Yeah, that just makes Stoneforge Mystic better. It makes me think that the trajectory for Stoneforge Mystic will only ever continue to go up as they make more mythic equipments.
Yep.
But it seems like the threshold has to have living weapon. It just needs a body immediately. It just needs to cheat a creature into play, right?
Or it has to be better than like sort of Fire and Ice.
Right. Yeah.
Which
it has to have some kind of broken payoff.
Yeah.
But yeah, and so what the top 16 stands out to me, we'll go through the nitty gritty here. But from a macro sense, it points out to me that Urza Saga and Ragavan are new pillars of the format, and that's not going anywhere.
Yeah, I mean that's the way. I mean, look at Jeskai Saga still. You know, like that's a perfect example of like there's 4 of each of those cards in that deck, right?
Jeskai Saga still, when I watch it, when I look at it on paper, everything about that deck seems like it shouldn't work. There are so many discombobulated pieces and so many different misconstrued plans. Like if you I have looking at it on paper, you know, there's a Curse Scroll and there's 4 Ragavans, but there's also Murktide Regents, but you have so many bullets that are artifacts that don't go to the graveyard, and then you're playing Stifles and Standstills. It's like the deck to me is so all over the place that I think when you open a 7, what is your deck even trying to do other than go turn 1 Ragavan and then just completely go off of that plan after the fact? It's like it's just it's like all good cards in a deck that are all busted. Totally.
Yeah. Well, the thing is the still part of that. There's only 2 standstills in the deck, so like you can't really. I don't think of Merfolk when I was playing it as with 3 standstills in it as a standstill deck. It was just like this is a card that will help me draw 3 cards later on in the game, you know, because I've got Aether Vial. You know,
so, So what I'll say is the Jeskai Saga still deck that made it into the top 4. It has 22 lands, it looks like 22 lands in it, 4 Urza Saga, 3 Wasteland, and it's playing 3 colors.
Yeah, it's a 3-color deck.
And I look at something like this and I go, how does this deck ever beat a Wasteland? How does it ever get through a Wasteland? And when I watch it, like I've seen the deck play out, it's an extremely powerful deck because like you have to deal with every single Modern Horizons 2 threat that it presents because they're all game-ending mythics.
Well, but let's look at the rest of the top 8 here, and you can see that there's only there's 2 Death and Taxes decks, so you've got Ports and Wastelands there, but everything else, you know, even the Merfolk deck they're playing Caverns, they're not playing Wastelands.
You have Ports and Wastelands and D&T.
Delver is there, yeah.
Yeah.
But all the other, so the top 4 decks are lands. That's Ghost Quarter even in that deck. So there are 4 Wasteland decks. Yeah, I mean, my point does not stand at all. Basically, like every one of these decks minus the 8 Walla and Reanimator are Wasteland decks. So yeah, I don't know how this guy made it this far. I mean, obviously, if we look at the top 16, we can get a better idea, and we have to look at that one guy's matchups throughout the day. But I don't know, maybe just playing turn 1 Ragavan is good enough, even if you get wasted out.
So turn 1 Ragavan is absolutely good enough. I find Ragavan at this point in its existence in the format to just be a net negative. I think it's a net negative on the format just because of what it does on turn 1.
Yeah.
It has interesting gameplay applications after the game has developed a little bit, but it's like on turn one, whether it exacerbates the die roll. So if you have it on turn one and it's backed by a daze, the game is over.
Yeah.
If you play it on turn one and you don't play into the daze, the game is over. It just makes and then if you do have an answer and then fight over it, right? So like if you're also a daze deck, so they go Ragavan, you go, okay, kill it, they daze it, you daze it back. It's like, okay, so we both mulligan to 5.
Yeah.
And it's like it just doesn't create any interesting gameplay for a 1-drop to me because it's so snowbally. Anyway,
so looking at this,
that aside,
one of the wonderful things about having this on Google Sheets to look at is I can search really fast. And in the top 16, there are 0 gut shots.
Yeah, I think that's because gut shot's too narrow. And
I mean, if you're going to auto lose to a Ragavan and Delver of Secrets is being played pretty heavily, and Esper Sentinel is being played pretty heavily in the decks that won it, like, why not? So
I totally agree that gut shot should be a higher consideration. I think people are just stretching what, like, sideboard cards right now need to handle both your, looking at least this top 16, they need to handle your Ragavan decks, but then they also need to deal with your Urza Saga decks, right, as the other pillar. And then they need to be able to deal with Green Sun Zenith decks. And Green Sun Zenith decks, like, yeah, you can hit their, like, turn 1 Dryad Arbor, but beyond that, it's not really going to do much work other than trading down with the Baleful Strix. You look at the Lance deck, they don't care about it. If you're looking at Madness, all right, you can catch a Root Walla, but it's already done its job.
Yeah, yeah. So
it seems like it is a very narrow card that specifically would go onto, like, hitting Delver and hitting D&T, which is good. Like, that to me is, if you're hitting 2 big decks like that, it's totally reasonable to include.
Yeah, like being able to kill Thalia even, like, on your turn 2 after they, like, you play nothing after you play land and they say go, and you say go, and it's their turn 2 and they play Thalia, and then you tap the land and gut shot your opponent's Thalia. That seems great.
Yeah, I think that I don't know. The reason that it hasn't seen play is if we look at the decks that care about those, like, that are looking to make those kinds of exchanges with a Blue-Red Delver deck or a D&T deck, those decks have more versatile removal. If you're a white deck, you have Prismatic Ending and Swords to Plowshares, and then you have just better removal, and you're definitely stretched in your sideboard with the current metagame if you're in white, right? And you're playing that kind of deck. Like, if you are the Bant, like, Miracles deck, like, whatever the closest thing to blue-white X control is at this point in the metagame, it seems like it's just Bant because that's the highest performing, like, blue-white X deck.
Yeah.
That deck is so stretched, and against those types of aggro decks, you need to be able to kill the Ragavan, but there are just better cards that also go across multiple matchups that you don't just need to, like, deal 2 to yourself to deal with. You know what I mean? It's too narrow of a sideboard card for what it does.
For what it's worth, while you're saying that about the Bant deck, 0 Bant decks in this in this breakdown.
So should we
something to note?
Do we talk about Bant last time or on our last session where I was coming out against Bant?
Yes.
I think the mana base for that deck is so awful that I am consistently shocked that it ever puts up a result.
Yeah. Oh, here you go. I mean, this is a perfect example of you being correct. Doesn't happen often, folks.
It doesn't happen often. I think it's like one of those things where now that people know that Bant matters and you learn how to play against it, I just think that deck's mana is so stretched that they can't do all of the things that they want to do when they want to do them. So the agency for the pilot is restricted by what mana the deck allows for it to do based on what their hand is, right? Like, it's not easy to play your Ice Fangs and your double green and double blue cards without that wants basics and duels. It's too stretched when your early game to develop is all in white between Swords and Prismatic Ending. And it makes sense to me that it isn't here. But what do you think about Urza Saga just being Urza Saga and Ragavan both being good in combo, aggro, and control decks?
Yeah, I mean, dude, it's really problematic to me. So look, let's talk about real fast let's rewind 4 or 5 years ago when Deathrite Shaman existed in the format, and people were like always talking about ways to play around Deathrite Shaman, Pithing Needle, stuff like that. Stuff that's like, yeah, it stops that card, but like it's not worth it to put in the deck. And that's sort of where we are kind of with Gutshot. Like, yeah, sure, you can do a point of damage to somebody, but so we're quickly running into a thing where you're gonna again get to this point where the payoff to play cards that kill the thing you want to stop, is it worth it? And it's not that it's like better to lose that card, but like Legacy is a wide enough meta that you're going to lose that card more often than not, but it's not going to be in every deck. So it's not going to be worth it to play like answer cards to that card. And I think that's kind of what we're creeping up on with Ragavan. Now, Urza Saga, I don't know. Urza Saga, I haven't seen it like in play enough to really get a feel for like how I feel in my gut about that card.
It's absolutely busted.
Yeah, no. I agree. I agree it's busted, but is it worse than Ragavan? I don't think it's worse than Ragavan. But we're also like we gotta think politically too. Does Wizards give a shit?
No, I don't
about
think
Legacy. I don't think they'll take any action anytime soon.
I don't think either card is going to get banned. So like, I don't think there's any worries there.
Yeah.
Even though I think both cards are way too good for what they cost. Like 1 red mana for what you get with Ragavan, or just for free what you get for Urza Saga. They're both just really harsh development mistakes in my mind. But they're not going to go anywhere anytime soon. They're going to be around for at least a year. And the thing is that they're going to see play in, as we've seen, aggro, combo, and control decks, both of them. Ragavan shows up in Painter and blue-red, and then also in any of like the mid-range, like Jeskai lists that have been showing up. Urza Saga obviously shows up in lands. It shows up in like Urza Echo. It shows up in Painter. So they're going to be around for a while. They're the new pillars of the format. So now the question becomes, okay, how do you deal with all of these things? And one of the first things that seems to have stuck out in second place here, Black Red Reanimator made a big splash in this event, playing only 1 grief. Still, is it still on all 4? Oh, it's playing Archon of Cruelty too. That's a new card from MH2 that's seeing more play. So, and it's on all 4 unmasked still, only playing 1 grief. The utility of being able to target yourself still matters more with unmasked over grief, even though grief does become a 5th copy of it here. But a glass cannon deck like this can just kind of not care about those cards that are trying to play freebies. The other thing, though, is...
Am I losing my mind? Or does that deck not have any Grizzlebrands in it?
I see 4 Grizzlebrand.
Okay. There it is. Okay. Sorry. I freaked out for a second. It's also got Sarah's Emissary, too.
So one thing about a deck like Black-Red, which seems like it would do really well in a field of a bunch of decks that aren't playing counter magic or any way to really stop the graveyard because they're so mid-rangey, is just, killing people like as soon as you can. But one thing about Reanimator in particular that I think combats Ragavan. Now, I wish there was a way to like actually see data sets of this, but the fact that it is a deck that is just redundant, right? And so if a Ragavan hits you, it hitting a critical like card that's part of your strategy is going to be less so because all of your cards do the same thing, right? Yeah.
Your cards are either cards that get cards in the graveyard or cards that get things out of the graveyard, or it's giant dudes. And your opponent, your Ragavan opponent, also isn't going to be able to use those to his advantage for the most part.
That same idea can go for the Madness deck, which is all 4 ofs down the line, right?
Yeah.
Like
that deck is just like this big. It's just a chunk of cards.
And they all do the same thing for the most part, right? It's like discard outlets, the free spells, and then the payoffs. And none of those cards are going to benefit your opponent really because they're not priced to do that. They're priced to do something busted on the opposite end of the spectrum. Yeah. And so that deck also does well in a field that's full of a bunch of Ragavans and then a bunch of like mid-range creature decks like D&T and Merfolk. I'm going to hop over quickly to Merfolk because I know that's your specialty. Where is the Merfolk god, bro?
The Merfolk god's in there. Sylvania or Sylvain? There's two of them. There's two of them.
Bro. How is that not a 4 of in your non-brainstorm deck?
I think because you're kind of glutted at the 3 spot, man. You've got.
Do you still need True Name? Is True Name still the best thing to be doing?
True Name's still the best thing to be doing at 3. Like you just want to just draw. Like imagine you have out your turn 1 is Vile. Your turn 2 is play a Lord. Let's say your turn 3 is attack with your Lord. Plop in off the Vial another Lord, so that's 3, and then you cast a True Name Nemesis, right? And then you untap, and your turn 4 is like throw down another Lord, and your True Name Nemesis swings for, like you've got what, a 5 damage True Name Nemesis, so that's 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. That's your turn 4. Your opponent's taking 13 damage, and you're probably just gonna slam like another True Name or another Lord,
Yeah, so I think actually the real winner here that can keep True Name around is subtly the 4 Tide Shaper. And I say that
Tide Shaper
at least in the sample deck of this top 8, or this top 16 rather. This player made it to the top 8. Zachary Kloss made it to the top 8 with Merfolk, playing 4 Tide Shaper. And on the way, I'm looking at a lot of lands. I'm looking at a lot of D&T. I'm looking at some other combo. I'm looking at some Green Sun Zenith decks. I'm looking at looking at goblins. I see a lot of decks that don't have islands in them. That is going to make your Master of the Pearl Tridents and Lord of Atlantis' island walkability look pretty bad.
Yeah.
So I think Tide Shaper turning that on is important.
That's not always been the case in Legacy. There's not a lot of blocking and a lot of like combat happening outside of like just turning your stuff sideways. That you really need to worry about that much. And the only time it matters,
I'm looking at a bunch of creature decks that don't have islands in them.
Yeah, but they're turning their creatures sideways too for the most part. So like if you get it against an opponent who's playing Reanimator, their creatures are only like
if you're playing against Glass Cannon combo, the red zone isn't what matters in those games. I'm talking about stuff like D&T. I'm talking about like the mid-range Tarmogoyf.
It definitely helps versus D&T, that's for sure. But you're as fast as the D&T deck, and often you're bigger than the D&T deck too. If your guys are 3/3s, like most of their deck is not going to be able to stop it. And God forbid you slam down a second Lord and all of your guys are 4/4s, like that's it. Like your opponent, like Merfolk is fine, already pretty good against D&T, in my opinion, because all they have is 4 Swords to Plowshares. Like that doesn't do a whole lot against you.
No, dude,
and like
they have
Mom doesn't matter that much.
What do you mean Mom doesn't matter that much? That's protection. They know that you're not playing any removal if you're Merfolk.
Yeah, but they're slower than you because of that, though. They're tapping their turn 1 play is like Mom to protect their thing, to block, that sort of thing. Meanwhile, you've got counter magic to stop their important plays, and they don't have a lot of important plays.
What do you mean? You have Force of Will to counter their important plays, and Chalice, which doesn't matter against them. You need.
You take the Chalice out after. In the board, and you probably pop in. You've got Harbinger of the Tides to bounce things, like that. That's probably where you want to go there. And you've got Dismember as well. Like you're going to bring in Dismember. You're going to take your Chalices out against this deck.
I'll concede some amount to you because you have way more experience than Merfolk than I do.
Like you're just a straight creature. It's like playing against a draft deck on the same. Like you're on the same competitive edge as your opponent's creature deck, except for all of your creatures are larger. And you're right, the Tide Shaper helps a lot because, like, obviously now they're unblockable. But like, in a straight matchup before Tide Shaper existed, I give D&T the thumbs down against Merfolk.
Dude, and Tide Shaper is nutty. No, Tide Shaper's stock. Of all of these cards in this,
I'm not saying Tide Shaper is bad by any stretch of imagination. I think
Tide Shaper has to be the best adoption for Merfolk because it hits every single pillar in the format right now. It's a one-mana blocker for Ragavan, and it hits Urza Saga. This card is an absolute banger in the format right now.
Okay. You put it that way, I 100% agree with you. Not that I didn't agree with you before. I just think that Merfolk doesn't have a problem against D&T.
No, I get that, but like also.
But yeah, I think Tide Shaper is great, and it's a 2/2 if you kick it right.
There are going to be. I get the term non-zero can tilt some people, but there are a non-zero number of games too where you go against D&T and their lands are like Wasteland, Port, Plains, and you cut them off white.
Non-zero shouldn't tilt anybody, by the way.
You can hit some like. The one thing that I'm seeing that like almost annoys me is that I get it's on 4 Caverner Souls and 4 Immutable, but I want to see 4 Wasteland to pair with the Tide Shaper and really get people. Talk to me, Zach. Why has Rashadan Dockhand seen 0 play? Did we just totally punt that card?
Yeah, you know what?
Were we wrong? It turns out
the actual rare, it was a misprint, and the actual rare was Tide Shaper, man.
Dude,
sometimes the uncommon is the better card.
Yo, is Tide Shaper the answer for like a bunch of other decks that aren't Merfolk too? Because it blocks Ragavan and it kills Urza Saga, right? I'm thinking about this correctly.
Yeah,
it turns it into an island. It loses its Saga text,
into an
right?
Island. It still is a Saga, so it checks itself to see if it has any counters, but its number of counters is 0 and it dies because of like the way Sagas work.
Right. That I'm not thinking about it wrong. That it like will still get lore counters and just not do anything and be there for mana, right?
Now that said, no, it won't even be there for mana.
It'll just die. It just kills it.
I think it will either die immediately or die during your next turn.
It's 2 mana, kill your Saga.
Yeah. So here's the only downside of that.
I really hope we're not wrong there. I should have checked that out beforehand.
I'm almost 100% positive. I think we had this conversation a couple weeks ago. But the only downside of that is that if they don't have any islands, you don't get the island walk off of it.
Who cares?
Yeah,
kill the Urza Saga. Like if they have a Thespian stage on the table, turn it off.
Yeah.
If they have a Dark Depths on the table, turn it off.
I mean, I'm not going to talk any crap about this guy's deck because it's solid. Like, and again, like this is the only other deck. This is the only deck that's actually smaller than the 8-Walla deck.
Dude, I am.
It looks good. Here's
beside myself.
Here's my takeaway.
Beside myself, Zach. I can't believe that Tide Shaper is the nut.
Yeah, Tide Shaper's good. Here's my takeaway from this. So I'll read this deck real fast because it's not a whole lot to read. 4 Vial, 4 Void, 4 Chalice, 4 True Name, 4 Silver Gill Adept, 4 Merfolk Trickster, 4 Master of the Pearl Trident, 4 Lord of Atlantis, 4 Saloon.
2 Savellan, not 4.
Sorry, 2 Savellan. 4 Tide Shaper, 1 Brazen Borrower, 2 Harbinger of the Tide, 4 Force of Will, 4 Caverns, 12 Island, 4 Mutavault. So that it's a very slim down, like boom, that's what your deck is. The only thing that I'm like kind of about is like I know that like the Cavern of Souls is important because of the Chalice of Void. I would want Wastelands in this deck, and like I just don't know where I would cut at.
I agree. I think that so. Here's
look. He made the top 8, so I don't think he built the deck wrong by any stretch of the imagination. I'm talking about my personal feelings about how I like to play Merfolk.
I think you and I want 2 different kinds of Merfolk deck, and I think the kind of Merfolk deck that you want, I think, is how he built it. Because if you are trying to lean on the aggressive side of just get your opponent dead, and you're leaning more on your True Name Nemesis rather than Savellans, then you don't care really about your Wastelands because you're like, I want to get you dead. I want to spend my mana every turn. I want to close the door. Yeah. And I am on the side of like, I want to play with more Savellans. I want to grind. I like the tools here because between Wasteland, Tide Shaper, maybe Dockhands, like you have a more controlling game. And I am drawn more to that. But this deck is way more close the door. This is Chalice, 4 True Name. It's just not messing around, right? It just wants to get you dead.
This deck is the Colonel's 3-piece, dude. This is the...
And also, like, I'm looking at the sideboard. Venser Shaper Savant has to be for the show and tell matchup. Energy Flux also for the Affinity deck, but
okay.
I guess also for the Urza Echo deck, if that matters. I mean, that deck's a bit fast, but like one thing is Affinity has dropped off the face of the earth. Like it had that insane first week, and then it has just done nothing since. Right?
Yeah.
That could be unless it's showing up where I'm not seeing it, but like
what's
Urza
wild?
Echo's still around, but
what's wild is that like so this is the sideboard is its own thing too, and this is not how I have ever built a sideboard for this deck. And
what do you mean?
So I mean, I add a lot more counter magic. I worry about storm decks and whatnot, but
dude, again, that's what I'm
there's
saying.
There's no storm decks in this top 8.
He is not interested in playing that sort of like he's got 2 force negation, but otherwise these are hammers, right? Yeah. Cage, Macabre, Flux. Like he just is like, I'm not interested in dilly-dallying. I want to close the door and I want to close it fast. And I can respect it.
I like it. I like it a lot.
I think Tide Shaper is I guess the sleeper. I did not think about how good that card lines up against 2 massive pillars of the format right now.
And it's enough to mess with everybody. I mean, I used to play in Legacy. I used to play the enchantment version of that card, and it didn't come with a 2/2.
Oh, Spreading Seas, yeah.
Yeah, I used to play Spreading Seas in I played 2 Spreading Seas
doesn't
main
attack.
Deck,
It draws a card, but it doesn't attack. Where do you stand?
But what card do you want to draw? You just want to draw more dudes. Like your whole deck is just dudes. Like you're probably just going to draw a dude. Why not just play?
I agree that you're more interested in the body, especially because the body blocks Ragavan.
Yeah.
Where do you stand?
And the body is likely going to be a 3/3 or a 4/4 when you're attacking with it.
Oh yeah, it's gonna. One thing that I remember we talked about that when Dockhand was spoiled. We were like, one of the weaknesses of Merfolk is that it doesn't have any really good 1-drops. It's got like Aether Vial and that's it. And then I had Curse Catcher, but Curse Catcher,
Now that you don't have to this is the thing is like replacing Curse Catcher with Tide Shaper. Like you're just like, look, I'm definitely not even gonna think that combo exists in this format, and I'm just gonna try and punch all the way through.
I mean, all of his combo hit is definitely stacking the board, right? Like he's multiple to Grafdigger's Cage. He has Sorcerer's Spyglass to also help with the land style combo deck matchups. So you can turn off like Thespian Stage and whatnot. You can also Sorcerer's Spyglass just being a Pithing Needle is also a way to like slow down Urza Sagas.
Yep.
Which you don't have Wastelands, so I mean you only have 4 Tide Shapers, so you don't have any Ponders of Brainstorms.
Does Spyglass stop Urza Saga from tapping for mana? I can't remember the text on Spyglass.
I don't remember, but it stops like the relevant make constructs ability.
Yeah.
It'll still tutor, but so it goes. Where do you stand on the land side of the world right now? Do you think that land should be in the green-white mid-rangey area? Do you think people should be on the Turbo Depths combo area, or do you think people should be on the classic prison control, Valakut exploration, red-green, stall forever till 2020?
I mean, turbo, in my opinion. Go fast or go home.
Yeah, there's like lands has a lot of interesting configurations because it can play combo, aggro, or control between those. Or I'm sorry, combo, mid-range, or control between those 3 builds. There's just like a lot of options for it, and a bunch of upgrades between Urza Saga and Yavimaya.
So it can still produce the mana ability. Spyglass allows mana abilities.
True or false? Goblins is actually the best tribal deck in the format.
False. I mean, we can prove that just by looking at this top 8, man.
I don't know. Yeah, you want to take this one sample size and we just extrapolate it as obvious facts of the entire.
Yeah. No, but you know what a good question is about the Goblin deck? Let me just find out real fast. Let me see.
Sting Scourger in the main.
37. Damn it. It's not going to tell me how many goblins is in the deck. I just want to see how many cards is in this goblin deck, if it's more or less than the sometimes they play like 63 cards. But like I'm not gonna add all that up.
There are 32 goblins in this goblins deck.
I mean, look, if you match the two up, Merfolk versus Goblins, I think Merfolk still gets crushed by Goblins. Just kind of is what it is, especially with the Sharpshooter is just like super good a lot of times. Like Sharpshooter, if you can like get 1 or 2 Goblins dead, it's generally like Goblins. Merfolk dead, and you can like sack your own Goblins to untap the Sharpshooter and stuff. It's a lot of times it's really game over.
Dude, I'm looking at a bunch of D&T decks in this top 16. None of them are playing Yorion. Is that a mistake?
I don't think so, man. I've always been soft on Yorion. I think that card's always been a gimmick, and I've just never. Man, like I get playing like a 41 card draft deck or like a 61 card standard deck, but like in Legacy, I just like playing more than 60 cards just seems crazy to me. But people do it and they put up results. So who am I?
Leovold, Emissary of Trust, still the truth, or just like C-time role player?
Well, I mean, there's not a whole lot of bug decks out there, right? Like, there's this one bug deck that did fine, you know, but like, I don't know, man. It didn't seem like it doesn't seem like it's the role player it once was. It's not the boogeyman that it was back when Grixis the Grixis deck was like the best deck, and you just like splashed in green because you were playing Deathrite Shaman. You're like, cool, I just have this. I'm gonna do this too.
So I bring up the Leovold side of things because it's the only Green Sun Zenith deck represented in this top 16. And before MH2 came out, I think it was fairly clear that Green Sun Zenith was itself a pillar of the format, right? The same way that Aether Vial was. Green Sun Zenith decks were like, you were playing an Aether Vial deck, you were playing like a Ponder Brainstorm deck, you were playing a Green Sun Zenith deck. That seems to have fallen by the wayside as the only real Green Sun Zenith deck that sees a ton of play, at least on mine from the data that I've looked at, is Elves is primarily the Green Sun deck that's around. Way less so this like sort of mid-rangey pile, like check pile of old almost. And I struggle to find what matchups you're like hoping to run into playing with this deck, only because with Blue-Red Delver getting the adoption of Murktide Regent, okay, I mean, this particular player, Duke Vitro, he went with a split on 2 Abrupt Decay and 2 Assassin's Trophy. Mm-hmm. And it's tough because like if that doesn't line up for you, then you just lose because you have the wrong removal. And it feels awkward if your control or mid-range deck has removal and just not the right one. It's why I'm always drawn to Swords to Plowshares and now Prismatic Ending, because they're so much more versatile. They hit everything. Yeah. Now, like obviously Prismatic Ending doesn't hit Murktide Regent, but like Swords to Plowshares does, and it's as a 4 of in both cases where this is a 2 of. But like Abrupt Decay, Fatal Push, these cards don't touch Murktide, and Murktide is everywhere between Blue-Red Saga. Between Standstill, Saga Still, whatever, and Blue-Red Delver. It's so crazy to me that Murktide is like the truth, right? Because like, if every deck is playing Red Elemental Blast, like what the hell? Historically, that just like really cheap fat beater has always been a mainstay as a way to diversify. Whether you're talking about Tarmogoyf being the diversification for Delver before, where it was like the fatty that wouldn't die to bolt. And then even in Grixis control, like Grixis control of old Red before Blast, Uro was around. You can't Red Blast a Tarmogoyf. That's why Rug Delver was good. No, but you can Fatal Push it. You know? I agree. I guess the reason why Murktide is good is because the format hasn't caught up to the fact that it's good yet. That's what I think. I think that once the format catches up to that, then there's going to be like, it's just like when Fatal Push first came out and Tarmogoyf just disappeared for like a few like 6 months and then came back. Now we're back in that same spot again where like people are like, oh, Murktide Regent, I'll play that. And until people start losing enough to Murktide Regent, you won't see stuff like
decks that like play enough red elemental blast to kill it. Like most of these decks, like I think
dude, you're talking red elemental blast. I'm looking at these decks.
There are
less than half the field are on red.
Yeah. I mean, that used to be the thing back in the day, man. You could what was that snake? I mean, Murktide Regent has some bonuses going for it. One, it flies. That's huge. That's the difference between Cryptic Serpent and Murktide Regent right there, right? The main difference is that it flies. Because even let's say that you only got it out as a 3/3 and your opponent wasn't playing Lightning Bolt, probably a 3/3 for 2 mana when you need it as a beater is probably fine. Whereas a 6/5 that your opponent can block a bunch of times with guys, that's not great, right?
Dude, Tombstalker was a banger back in the day. And then Gurmag came around and that took over as the better delve threat. And now Murktide's around and Murktide's just better because Murktide is in blue, which is where you want to be for the most part anyway.
Gurmag was better because it cost 1 mana.
Gurmag was good because it cost 1 mana, but it was on the ground. And it was
that's why it was better.
Easy.
That's why it was better because it was on the ground. It was not because it was on the ground, because it cost 1 mana. If it had cost 2 black and 5 colorless, no one would have ever played it.
Nobody would have played it because you're getting a 5/5 on the ground and that's it. Murktide's an 8/8 in the air.
Well, I'm saying versus Tombstalker, you would just play Tombstalker instead.
Oh, but that's also because most of those decks, double black was a really high cost.
Yeah.
Double blue is not a huge cost, and it's also bigger and better. But I'm saying that the cheap fat beaters as a way to diversify your threat suite has been a critical part of the format forever, from way back when Team America was a deck.
All right. Well, let's cap this with a couple of points, right? Murktide Regent is real. Tide Shaper is good. Right?
I think the real takeaway from this episode, other than get used to Ragavan and Urza Saga just being the pillars of the format that need a place to live, a la Aaron Forsyth, whatever nonsense. We're going to lose to those cards forever and ever for the rest of our lives. But the real takeaway here is Tide Shaper. Absolute goddamn banger.
Tide Shaper, yeah. Well, there you go. We'll leave it at that. Tide Shaper is a card you should own. It's uncommon, so you shouldn't have trouble finding them. If you enjoyed this podcast, if you enjoyed this YouTube, like and subscribe. If you enjoyed the podcast, go ahead and subscribe as well. Don't forget to join our Patreon. It's patreon.com/eternaldurdles. And that's it for this week. Thanks, everybody.